Long before the pyramids and spectacular temples sprawled across Egypt, King Narmer founded the first dynasty in pharaonic history. For over 3,000 years, 345 pharaohs succeeded one another until the inevitable fall of ancient Egypt. Some of these kings would become iconic. One of them gained his status for his communication skills and the preservation of his mummy.
In an age before social media offered eternity, you could only etch your image in stone.
Ramesses is one of the pharaohs who's one of the most prolific builders and fairly egotistical.
We don't have the bodies of Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Charlemagne, or even Louis XV, but we can see Egyptian kings, and that's absolutely extraordinary.
Where did he come from? How did he rule?
Here we have Ramesses alone in his chariot, pulling his bow and arrow. So it really shows him as a quintessential king who is victorious and a great military hero.
Ramesses II had a very active love life. He had 7 great royal wives. He's supposed to have had around 100 children, and there could have been even more.
How did Ramesses II become one of history's most famous pharaohs, along with his queen, Nefertari, whom he elevated to the rank of goddess?
He clearly wanted to honor this queen in particular because she was beautiful, and he was certainly very much in love with her.
Now, through insights from leading international experts, we will reveal the true story of the greatest of all builder pharaohs.
You came across the river and the first thing you saw was this huge images of himself.
This room would have held his sarcophagus. It would have been somewhere in the floor that I'm standing.
Here are the final secrets in the unique story of Ramesses II, a pharaoh whose life transformed the world and changed the course of history. Ramesses II, a name eternally synonymous with prestige, power, and glory. He is the pharaoh par excellence. He single-handedly embodied the greatest civilization of antiquity.
Ramesses II is one of the most famous pharaohs of Egypt because he reigned for a very long time and he made sure that everyone knew his name.
He reigned for 3 or 4 generations. That means that there were Egyptians who knew only him and his reign, which can be compared to that of Elizabeth II today.
His name has survived from ancient Egypt to now and inspires kinds of thoughts of grandeur and all the things that he accomplished. He set out to make a name for himself, and he did, and it lasted forever.
To understand how Ramesses II became so popular, we need to go back 3,000 years to northern Egypt. Ramesses II was born around 1300 BCE, probably in the city of Avaris, the former capital of the 15th dynasty pharaohs who had ruled Egypt 300 years earlier. At birth, nothing predestined him to become king, as his family was not on the Egyptian throne.
When he was born, Ramses was not a prince. He wasn't a prince by blood. He was the son of a dynasty of generals.
But in 1292 BCE, the 10-year-old Ramesses II was blessed by a twist of fate that made him crown prince. The 18th dynasty, that of Hatshepsut, Amenhotep III, Akhenaten, and Tutankhamun, ended in chaos.
When it was time to recreate Egypt after the reign of Akhenaten and his son Tutankhamun, Horemheb took over.
Horemheb was not of royal blood. Yet, in 28 years of reign, this general, who became pharaoh by force of circumstance, managed to restore balance to a kingdom in perdition. However, Horemheb had no children, and therefore no successors to task with Egypt's protection. As a good military man, he turned to someone who had already proven himself on the battlefield, a man he trusted implicitly.
He saw this guy named Ramses, who was from the Nile Delta, probably very talented, very smart, very good at military affairs and political affairs, who importantly had sons and grandsons, so he knew that was okay, and he made him his successor.
The man's name was Ramesses II. He was grandfather to Ramesses II. At Horemheb's death, Ramesses II unexpectedly became pharaoh under the title of Ramesses I.
When this happened, we think of it as a new dynasty. This is the 19th dynasty, starting with Ramesses I. Ramses I reigned for a short period of time and started rebuilding Egypt.
We can clearly see that at the beginning, we're talking about a kingship based on a kind of military aristocracy, but not of royal blood. That's what you have to understand.
Already an old man when he ascended the throne, Ramses I died in his second year of reign, leaving the throne to his son Seti I, father of the future Ramses II. When he ascended to the throne, Seti I inherited a kingdom at war with the Hittites, ancestors of the Turks.
Ramses II was a very young child at the time, of course. We would never have imagined that Ramses II would go to war alongside his father as early as year 1 of Seti I's reign.
He would have grown up in a military family. His grandfather, Ramses I, was in the military. His father was part of the military. And he would have been raised around soldiers, understanding the importance of military campaigns, the importance of fighting, and what that can bring to Egypt in terms of economic prosperity and political domination.
It was against this backdrop that the young Ramses II, only son of Pharaoh Seti I, received the education of a future king. An education as much military as political.
This little boy was obviously raised in the harem, like all little princes. The harem at the time was nothing like Ottoman harems. They were open places, where the pharaoh's wives and children lived, but where all officials and men could visit freely. He received a very good education there.
He knew what his role was going to be, so he learnt about statecraft. He was a good military man. He could hunt, he could ride, he could shoot, he could do all of these things. And so he really was a leader, and he set off in his life with an ego to match, which we will see when he became king.
Christian Leblanc is one of the leading specialists on Ramses II. He invites us to follow him to the Cairo Museum to discover one of the most precious and unique witnesses to this princely era. Discovered on the Tanis site by French Egyptologist Pierre Montet in 1934, this colossal statue represents the future pharaoh as never before.
Here you have a monumental work, quite extraordinary in fact, in which a bird, a peregrine falcon with its wings delicately folded back, is protecting a child who is represented kneeling, almost seated, with a finger at his mouth. And the child is Ramses in the form of a prince, but a very small prince, as he's still naked and kneeling.
This falcon represents the god Horon, a deity of the Egyptian pantheon associated with Horus, the god of heaven and royalty. A symbol of divine protection, its designers devised an ingenious rebus to identify the young prince under its wings.
You have the sun disk above his head, which is the god Ra in ancient Egyptian. The child himself, holding his finger to his mouth, is a hieroglyphic sign that reads Mes. And the reed he's holding in one of his hands reads Su. Ra, Mes, Su. This was Ramses II's family name. Seti I let it be known that he was practically crowning his son even before he died. It's clear that the young Ramses is destined to become king of Egypt, which of course he does.
When his father died in 1280 BCE, Ramses II was ready to assume the role of king. At the age of 23, he was already married to not one, but 2 women. Nefertari and Isisnufret became his 2 great royal wives.
These 2 young women were in his entourage very early on, and it was they who gave him his first children.
With his descendants and a worthy heir ready to succeed him on his death, Ramses II could be enthroned with peace of mind. He was crowned in all the religious centers of the kingdom, before the god Ptah in Memphis, the god Ra in Heliopolis, and the god Amun in Thebes.
These were the great theological centers, and he had to go through them to be recognized as the true legal pharaoh on the throne of Egypt.
Religious power is essential in ancient Egypt, since the king derives his legitimacy from the fact that both high priests and gods see the king as being capable of ascending to the throne of Horus.
Horus is a child god and one of the most important deities in the Egyptian pantheon. After this ritual, the new Horus on Earth, Pharaoh Ramesses II, honors his father, Seti I, and celebrates his funeral in the Valley of the Kings. The young king is full of ambition and plans.
Contrary to popular belief, we know very little about the character of Ramesses II. It's the human being who escapes us. We have more of a representation of this king, of this deity on earth even. Egyptian kings have never left us a diary like the ones we find, for example, with Louis XIV or others. But we can still discern certain traits. He's someone who's aware of the power he holds in his hands. He's someone who seeks to legitimize his power.
He is also entrusted with a mission of the utmost importance. He must consolidate the brand new 19th dynasty established by his father and grandfather. To accomplish this, he can count on the support of his mother, Tuya. He must first strengthen the crown's understanding with the powerful clergy of Amun, the most important religious authority in Thebes.
He saw the cult of Amun as very important. And he also saw it as something that was politically the right thing to do because the priesthood of Amun is powerful. So he had to respect that and nurture that relationship.
Ramesses II, like all great pharaohs, distrusted the clergy of Amun because they were a real counterpower. If the pharaoh was weak, the clergy would be strong and vice versa. Ramesses II would do everything in his power to reduce the power of Amun's clergy and make them his servants.
To achieve this, he gave the priests of Amun an important but controlled role. In year one of his reign, he took part in the Opet festival at Thebes between the temples of Karnak and Luxor, a major religious festival in honor of the god Amun.
This was the festival when the god Amun of Karnak would join the temple of Luxor for a time. He would rest in a special sanctuary where a number of mysteries would take place over a number of days. When the flood reached Thebes, Amun would take the flood with him from Luxor back to Karnak and then to all of Egypt. It was a very important festival, and the god Amun was the patron of this ceremony.
By celebrating this cult, Ramesses II returned to the grandeur of Egypt's past and established himself as a great diplomat. To consolidate the link between pharaonic power and the clergy of Thebes, he erected sacred places in honor of the god Amun.
He knew Luxor was very important, and he invested a lot of time, money, and energy into developing the Temple of Karnak, into building the Temple of Luxor.
The most masterful example is the decoration of the hypostyle hall in Luxor's Karnak temple. This colossal precinct is one of the best preserved jewels of ancient Egypt.
To give you an idea of the great hypostyle hall of Karnak, you can fit Notre Dame de Paris inside, which gives you an idea of the size of this gigantic temple.
But Ramesses II didn't stop building at Karnak. He had a dream of pharaonic proportions. To build a new capital. Named Pi Ramses, it was built in the Nile Delta, just a few kilometers from his hometown of Avaris.
It was a port city. We have a palace. We have places where his horses were trained. We have industrial sectors where there was metalwork, glass making, faience making, goldsmithing. So really it was a hive of industry and really a proper court where people from the north and the southern countries would come and gather.
Long lost, its ruins were rediscovered in the second half of the 20th century by Egyptian archaeologist Mahmoud Hamza. Covering an area of 15 square kilometers, it could have contained a population of 300,000.
You really feel that you're in a city of paradise. There are palaces, harems, temples, but above all, there are flowers and orchards. We know there were olive groves and vineyards. The wine of Pi Ramesses was famous, too.
It's where Ramses enjoyed living. So he built his palace there, he stayed there, and it would have been a vibrant city.
It was in this idyllic setting that Ramses II was able to rule Egypt and prepare his new dynasty to reign. In addition to Nefertari and Isisnofret, his two main wives, he lived surrounded by women who bore him children.
Ramses II had a very active love life. He had 7 great royal wives. These were the highest level of wives. These are the chief principal wives that had religious responsibilities and important roles, but he also had hundreds of other wives.
But in addition to ensuring his lineage, Ramesses II wanted to become a king who counted, and to do so, he must leave an indelible mark on the land of Egypt. For a pharaoh, the best way to do this was to build.
When he ascends the throne, he must assert his power. That's why he builds the greatest monuments. He wants to create something that's up to his standards. In other words, something out of the ordinary.
He's a pharaoh who lives in prosperous times and will do anything to create his legend.
First, he deified his father and grandfather and completed their works. Then he had his funeral temple built near Luxor, a gigantic temple erected to his glory, the Ramesseum.
Ramses is one of the pharaohs who's one of the most prolific builders and fairly egotistical.
Can you be a good pharaoh without being a megalomaniac? The answer is clearly no, because if you want to make your mark on history, you have to leave your image and your name absolutely everywhere.
Not only did his name feature on all the monuments he erected, but also on the temples and statues of his predecessors. A visionary, Ramesses II understood the importance of winning the hearts of his people through excessive propaganda.
In an age before social media offered eternity, you could only etch your image in stone. And what you do in real life contributes to your immortality. So if his face and name are everywhere, it's because he was the greatest pharaoh.
All of these monuments and the fact that he also usurped other kings' monuments suggest a very egotistical man who wanted to make sure that everyone knew his name and bowed down to his greatness.
For as pharaoh, he is God on earth, a role he delighted in embodying. If there's one monument that epitomizes this facet of Ramesses II, it's a temple built on the southern fringes of the kingdom, on the border with Nubia. A colossal edifice of imposing majesty and grandeur, Abu Simbel. Salima Ikram is an Egyptologist. She offers us an insight into this spectacular site.
This temple is truly monumental and astonishing because it was cut out of the living rock. And of course, it was built to impress, to show people the greatness of Egypt, and also to provide work for a lot of people.
An absolute masterpiece, the monumental facade features 4 gigantic 20-meter-high statues of Ramesses II seated, the equivalent of a 6-story building. More than 3,200 years after his reign, the mythical pharaoh still imposes his natural authority on anyone wishing to enter these premises.
You came across the river and the first thing you saw was this huge images of himself.
The king is looking down towards Nubia, and this temple at Abu Simbel is saying, this land is mine. I control this area, and you need to come as somebody who is respecting the authority of the king.
He wanted the Nubians to be impressed by the greatness of Pharaoh, and who could not be by such a magnificent monument. Egypt and Nubia had had a tense relationship over the millennia, but when Ramses was king, he was dominating Nubia, and so the temple really is a manifestation of Egypt's control over Nubia.
Ramses II began construction work early in his reign, but the temple was not enough to symbolize his control over Nubia. It established Ramses II as a god.
You feel it's someone with a very high opinion of himself, who does have the shoulders for royal power.
The entire architecture of the site is designed to honor the god Ramses II. Not only is Abu Simbel imposing its majesty, it also tells a story, the story of the temple's awakening.
One of the nicest features about this temple is the frieze of baboons on top. They are standing like this because baboons greet the sun and make noises when the sun rises. The rays of the sun, the first point they touched was the baboons. So generally they would wake up the temple. And then it goes down. You can see rewrote, the sun god. And on the sun disk, it would have probably been gilded originally. And so the sun would have struck it. And on either side, you have images of Ramses making offerings to Re.
But the story doesn't end there. It continues inside the temple, where a surprise awaits the traveler.
And here, in the Holy of Holies of Abu Simbel Temple, you can see the statues of the gods. We have the creator god Ptah, king of the gods Amun-Re, and Ramses II as a god, and also rewrote. So these are the gods who are most sacred here, but it is important to see that Ramses is amongst them. So he really is showing himself as a god on earth.
To make this sacred aspect even more magnificent, the designers of the Abu Simbel temple thought of everything, including an architectural detail that makes this sanctuary unique.
Twice a year, at the equinox, you would have in October and February a light coming in from the sun, illuminating these statues, which had a lot of gold on them. So they would shine in a brilliant way and really make people conscious of the fact that gods lived in this temple. The message of Ramses here is again to show his wealth, his power, and the fact that he was in control, and he is also one of the gods ruling on earth.
The temple also delivers another message, that of an historic event. Ramses II had a poem engraved on the inner walls, the story of the greatest chariot battle of antiquity. A battle that would make this extraordinary pharaoh even more legendary, the Battle of Kadesh.
When Ramses II took the throne, Egypt was in a difficult position. It had lost all of its former strength and empires in the Near East, and so he had this role of wanting to reestablish the former boundaries of Egypt that they had lost during the reign of Akhenaten and Tutankhamun.
At the time, Egypt's main enemies were the Hittites, ancestors of the Turks. Their power was growing in the north. They came dangerously close to Egypt's borders and became a real threat to the kingdom's equilibrium.
This Hittite empire overflowed as it went along, swallowing up various neighboring kingdoms, including Mitannia, which disappeared. And the Hittites were very interested in the whole Levantine facade, because that's where all the trade routes were.
These people were going to try not really to conquer Egypt, but at least to recover a certain number of trading posts that were very important to the Egyptians.
Ramses II is saying this simply can't do. We have to do something about the Hittites because they're too powerful and they're imposing on what Ramses II considered Egypt's property, Egypt's territory.
Ramses II is determined to demonstrate his power. The confrontation with the Hittites is inevitable. In year 5 of his reign, at the age of 27, the god pharaoh leads his troops toward the fortress of Kadesh to impose his law on these invaders.
Ramses II will finally have to face the Hittites to try to reconquer his fringes and thus redefine the borders of what was to be the Kingdom of Egypt.
This battle is incredibly famous, not really for its political importance. It's so famous and important because of the way Ramses II decided to talk about it.
What he tells is an epic tale worthy of the greatest Hollywood movies. When he arrives in Kadesh, he already imposes his strength and aura.
We know that Ramses II started this battle. He captured some Hittite spies, and they told him that the Hittite king was so scared that he was hiding and was not going to fight. So Ramses II is very confident, and he goes off with his division, and he thinks he's going to win. But the actual Hittites were there ready to fight. And the other divisions of the army were way behind, and they were stuck through a very narrow pass, and it would take them a long time to get to Ramses II.
Surprised by the Hittites' unfair maneuver, Ramses II was cornered. The power struggle between the two armies was immense. Ramses II's army numbered 36,000 men and 2,000 chariots, compared with 90,000 men and 3,700 chariots for the Hittites. But Ramses II miraculously came through, thanks to divine intervention.
He says that he prayed to the god Amun, and the god Amun gave him the strength and power, and so Ramses II almost single-handedly defeated everybody.
Here we have Ramses, alone in his chariot. The horses are galloping. He's pulling his bow and arrow, and everyone is far behind him. So it really shows him as a quintessential king who is victorious and a great military hero. So this is to show in a very literal way that the pharaoh is not just a man, but a god, and so everyone should be scared.
The battle lasted just one day, a day that would seal Ramses II's fate forever and restore the Kingdom of Egypt to its former grandeur. But is this really what happened? Is Ramses II recounting a purely historical event, or is he coming to terms with reality?
He wanted to make it very clear to everyone he won, but in reality, it was a stalemate. Ramesses II was able to come back to Egypt with captors, with a lot of, booty and wealth from this battle, but ultimately he didn't get the territory.
The Egyptians were unable to penetrate the citadel of Kadesh, so Kadesh was not taken.
But Ramses didn't lose face. It was the Hittite king, Muwatalli, who really lost all his aura because he wasn't with his men. He stayed behind. He attacked the Egyptians by surprise, which isn't done. You always war your enemy and end up face to face. So the Hittites made a whole series of diplomatic mistakes that meant that Ramses really got the victory back.
But each side stuck to its guns and claimed victory. For 15 years, Ramses II and the Hittite king stared each other down. But the pharaoh was a shrewd man. He had many enemies, with the Libyans to the west and Nubia to the south. And he knew he couldn't handle an attack on several fronts.
Many years after the Battle of Kadesh, these two empires were growing tired of fighting with each other. It just didn't make any sense anymore. They had bigger problems, so he did the smart thing, and he recognized that he had to make peace.
In year 21 of the reign of Ramses II, the Egyptians and the Hittites decided to make peace, a moment etched in stone that is known as the first peace treaty in history.
The Hittites were able to turn their attention to the Assyrians, and Ramses II was able to turn his attention to the west of Egypt and deal with the Libyans. So it was a mutually beneficial arrangement, and it shows the power of peace.
From then on, Egypt was pacified and remained so until the end of the reign of Ramses II. Egyptians and Hittites became brothers. As a token of the good relations between these two Mediterranean powers, the pharaoh married the Hittite king's daughter, Matorne-Ferure, in the year 34 of his reign.
Matorne-Ferure would have the rank of great royal wife, which means she'd be on an equal footing with the Egyptian queens.
A diplomatic marriage that sealed the political alliance between the two kingdoms. But this foreign queen did not go down in history as a lasting memory. There was one who seemed more important than all the others to Ramses II, the mother of his crown prince, Nefertari.
Nefertari was his great wife and perhaps the best known and the most important.
He gave her the title Great Royal Wife, and she really embodied that title in ways that some of the other queens hadn't previously. She had a special place in the life of Ramses II. She was involved in some diplomatic correspondence. We have some records of Nefertari writing the wife of other kings in the Near East, so she was in communication with other royal women abroad.
Ramses II had her image included on many of his monuments. He erected statues in her likeness, making her his equal. For if Ramses was God on earth, Nefertari was presented as a goddess.
In ancient Egypt, the gods didn't function alone. They were all couples.
The Egyptian king is the son of Horus, and a Horus on earth. You have to understand that your pharaoh is a divinity and a complete divinity. So when the king marries and has a wife who is the great royal consort, she will also play the role of a goddess. And we often find this couple, Horus and the goddess Hathor, the goddess of love.
They were a divine couple with whom the pharaonic couple identified for all eternity. In other words, they were the patrons of Egypt and should be respected as gods, which is totally in line with the way of thinking at the time.
She was a goddess in her own right, and so she needed a temple.
And this is the temple. Built 150 meters from Ramses II's temple at Abu Simbel, it's half the size of the pharaoh's.
This is a less monumental facade, but it is still very impressive. And the center is flanked by statues, and the first ones show Ramses II, then you have Nefertari, and then Ramses II again. And of course, the king and the queen are wearing different clothes, showing different manifestations and representations of themselves in their divine form. This was especially important to Nubia, because in Nubia there was a strong tradition of female rulership. And so, as a counterpoint, Ramses needed to have his wife shown here in an important position because, of course, the king ruled as a god and his wife was a goddess. So we see her here in her divine state, just as we see Ramses.
These walls explain the temple's function. The inscriptions provide an exceptional picture of Nefertari's role.
In this scene, you can see Nefertari making offerings to the goddess Hathor, who is in the form of a cow. And Hathor is coming out of the marshes on her sacred bark, and the queen is making offerings as high priestess. Hathor is a very important goddess of the Nubians in particular, because there are myths about Hathor going between Egypt and Nubia and coming back.
So this was a monument to her importance to Ramesses II, his great love and affection for her, and her important political role.
On her death, which Egyptians placed between years 21 and 34 of Ramses' reign, the pharaoh had a sumptuous tomb built for her in the Valley of the Queens, near the famous Valley of the Kings. Spared from looting and flooding, the tomb was discovered in 1904 in an extraordinary state of preservation. Its paintings offer a unique portrait of the Queen of Ramses II.
This young woman must have been very beautiful. It's true that when you look at the portraits in the tomb, they're absolutely magnificent representations. It's idealized, of course, but he clearly wanted to honor this queen in particular, because she was beautiful and he was certainly very much in love with her.
She has the most beautiful tomb in the Valley of the Queens. So she was there as a representation, obviously, of a beloved wife, and also, in this case, a living goddess to be paired with a living god.
After the death of his queen, Ramses II married 5 of her daughters. In all, he had 11 official wives, not counting the other women with whom he had many children.
There were about 100 children, sons and daughters combined. All these children appear to be legitimate, i.e. the offspring of recognized wives of Ramses II, not the children of concubines.
Ramses II recorded 103 children on the walls of his temples, but the figures could be much higher. Some estimates reach 300 or even 400 children.
He has children to populate the earth with his descendants. It's a megalomaniacal project, obviously, but it corresponds to the vision of a great pharaoh of his time.
But Ramses II was no ordinary pharaoh. If the numbers of his children and wives are staggering, so too are his long life and the length of his reign. When he died in 1213 BCE in his capital of Pi-Ramses, this illustrious monarch was over 90 years old, and with him ended a 67-year reign.
There's the whole ritual of embalming and mummification. After that, his remains are brought back to Thebes, where a tomb awaits him in the Valley of the Kings.
The tomb is an architectural jewel designed by Ramses II at the very beginning of his reign. Unfortunately, it has lost some of its splendor.
The terrible thing is, unfortunately, Ramses II's tomb was put in a place that's right on the water when it rains in the Valley of the Kings. It doesn't rain often, but when it does, you get torrents of mud and rocks that have gone straight into the tomb and blown all the walls off.
Though stripped of its former splendor by numerous floods, its size is impressive. With a surface area of 868 square meters, the equivalent of 2 soccer pitches, it is the second largest tomb in the Valley of the Kings. Our teams obtained exceptional permission to enter this tomb, which is closed to the public. Egyptologist Meredith Brand accompanies us to reveal the secrets of the final resting place of history's most famous pharaoh.
This image here at the beginning of the tomb is Ramesses II. It shows this is his tomb, and even though it's highly damaged, it's still a beautiful image. The king is pointing, making a gesture to this god here, the sun god rewrote. So this is the realm of the sun. We're entering into the afterlife and the journey of the sun.
The tomb descends 170 meters below the ground. This ancient gallery still bears the traces of a mysterious, once colorful tale.
And the hieroglyphs over here are part of a sacred text called the Litany of Ra, and it has the 75 names of the sun god Ra. This text is on the descending passage, taking you from the outside into the burial chamber.
The burial chamber of Ramses II, the most important and sacred part of the tomb.
This is the burial chamber of Ramesses II. This room would have held his sarcophagus. It would have been somewhere in the floor that I'm standing.
Ramesses II remained quietly in his eternal dwelling until the end of the Ramesside period. That is, until around 1050 to 1075 BCE, at a time when the entire royal institution had collapsed.
When the door closed on the tomb nearly 32 centuries ago, the pharaoh didn't expect his eternal sleep to be disturbed by unexpected enemies. 200 years after his reign, the kingdom was in the throes of an economic crisis.
At the end of the New Kingdom, there was an economic collapse, and people were in desperate need of money, and this changed the entire structure of Egyptian society. And all of a sudden, there was incredible, rampant tomb robbery all throughout the Valley of the Kings.
Driven by hunger, some Egyptians commit the ultimate sacrilege. They plunder the tombs of the pharaohs. Among them, the one that posterity dubbed Ramses the Great.
What would have been here? What did the robbers get? This must have been huge amounts of wealth from all over the known world were entombed with Ramses II, so he could have enjoyed it in the afterlife.
Knowing the treasures found intact in Tutankhamun's tomb, which is 8 times smaller than that of Ramses II, it's easy to imagine what the tomb of the hero of Kadesh might have contained. Coffins within coffins like Russian dolls, a golden mask, and gilded funerary furnishings beyond compare. Exceptional jewels lost forever to thieves. Fortunately, during this dramatic period, Ramses II could count on the support of the servants of the god he had worshipped, whose reputation he had restored during his lifetime. The priests of Amun came to the aid of the deceased pharaoh and his predecessors.
The high priests of Amun, as all this looting had taken place in the Valley of the Kings, set up commissions of inquiry to check all the tombs, see if they'd been desecrated, where the mummies were, find them, see what condition they're in. Because during the looting, sarcophagi were broken, bandages were removed from the royal mummies to obtain the amulets underneath, etc.
And they tried to save the mummies of the kings. They wanted to rewrap them, and they tried to fix them up a little bit to restore what they were. So they wrapped the mummies again, and they made notations explaining exactly what was happening.
The priests of Amun managed to save the mummies of dozens of pharaohs, among them that of Ramses II. After a series of stopovers in various tombs in the Valley of the Kings, his mummy survived the millennia protected by a coffin that was not intended for him, along with some 50 other mummies in a royal cache.
They took these bodies of the king and they moved them to a secret hidden spot. And they found the perfect location. They found a spot very high above the cliffs in Deir el-Bahri that nobody could get to. And they stashed all the mummies there. And this worked very well.
The Egyptians made us a sort of emergency vault to protect all the royal mummies.
So, in that hiding place, Ramses II was going to sleep for a while. Perhaps he thought he'd be there for eternity this time.
But this was not to be. The pharaoh's sleep was disturbed again almost 30 centuries later, in 1870, by 2 shepherds.
In the late 19th century, the Abdul Rasul brothers from the West Bank of Luxor, they discovered this cache of hidden mummies. And so they were pretty smart. They robbed this cache of mummies slowly by slowly, and they took out piece by piece and started selling them on the market. And eventually, the Antiquities Authority in Egypt got wind of this and said something strange is going on because we're seeing all the names of these kings and we've excavated their tombs, but nothing was found in the tomb. What's going on here? So eventually there was pressure, and one of these brothers ratted out the other brother, and the authorities came and found inside this tomb most of the mummies of the New Kingdom kings. This was an incredible cache.
At that instant, the head of the Egyptian authorities, Frenchman Gaston Maspero, grasped the extraordinary nature of the moment. He had before him the mummy of one of the most important kings of antiquity and Egypt's greatest pharaoh.
Seeing this mummy is almost a miracle because it hasn't disappeared and it's been identified with certainty. It turns out that the priests who did this in ancient times did a great job, so it's a gift they've given us for eternity.
That's Egypt's strength. We don't have the bodies of Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Charlemagne, or even Louis XV, but we can see Egyptian kings, and that's absolutely extraordinary, to be face to face with these kings who ruled Egypt millennia ago.
This is how the mummy of Ramesses II has survived the ages. The memory of his reign lives on to this day. Yet it almost disappeared forever and became the focus of an unprecedented rescue mission in the 1970s. We are in the Cairo Museum in Egypt in 1976. At the heart of the world's largest collection of Egyptian art, a drama is unfolding. A stench is emanating from the corridors of the mummy room. As they approach, the museum staff realize that it's coming from the display case of the most important figure in the gallery, the relic of history's most famous pharaoh, Ramesses II.
It turns out that Ramesses II has fallen prey to an attack of bacteria or fungus. We're not sure, but something that's disintegrating the mummy, so we'll have to treat it.
At the time, Egypt did not have the technical and scientific resources to meet this titanic challenge. This is where Ramesses II's destiny intersects with that of French Egyptologist Christian de Roche-Noblecourt. The scientist succeeds in convincing the Egyptian authorities to bring the endangered pharaoh's mummy to Paris to be saved.
So we're going to ask France, which has the means to treat Ramesses II, for help. The mummy was placed on a plane that landed at Le Bourget and was given the kind of greeting usually reserved for a head of state.
Ramesses II has an appointment at the Musée de l'Homme with a select group of scientists. These pioneers in ancient mummery conservation techniques are the last chance team to preserve the body of the king who has been dead for over 32 centuries. When the pharaoh is placed on the autopsy table, time seems to stand still.
The state of preservation of the mummy of Ramesses II is extraordinary. You can see exactly what his face looked like, with high cheekbones, a hooked nose, and a wide mouth that was blocked by a black pore during mummification. Traces of teeth can still be seen. We can see the ear, which is in very good condition, and above all, we can still see strands of hair lining the back of the skull and the nape of the neck.
It was very impressive to find yourself in front of the mummy of one of Egypt's most famous pharaohs. You can't help but be impressed.
Roger Lichtenberg had the privilege of being one of the experts commissioned to save the mummy and of experiencing this unique face-to-face encounter when the pharaoh came to France. At the time, he was in charge of X-raying the Egyptian king's body.
It was forbidden to touch it. That's normal. We're not going to start mobilizing an arm, a leg, etc., and risk breaking it, because a mummy is a very fragile thing. So we worked slowly.
His analyses enabled him to understand the state of health of Ramesses II at the time of his death. Dead at over 90, history's greatest pharaoh went through hell during the last years of his life.
The pharaoh's head was bent forward, and he obviously couldn't lead a normal life. So, when the embalmer stood in front of this bent-over pharaoh, he pressed down on his forehead and blocked his head backwards, fracturing the cervical spine in the process. This fracture is clearly visible here, with a shift backwards. At that point, the head returned to a more or less normal position.
The mummy required 7 months of care. The final stage takes place on the Plateau de Saclay near Paris, where the pharaoh's body is placed in a state-of-the-art scanner.
We'll irradiate Ramesses II for several hours to destroy all the fungi that are eating away at him. If France hadn't been able to do that, the mummy of Ramesses II would no longer exist, or it would be in a terrible state.
This is how France saved Ramesses II between 1976 and 1977. The mummy of this immortal pharaoh can now return to its rightful place in Cairo, Egypt.
It's now displayed in a showcase with optimal conservation conditions. And today, this mummy doesn't leave Egypt at all.
Since then, tourists have been able to contemplate the face of this legendary monarch with the illustrious surname. The most intimate testimony to one of the greatest kings in the history of mankind, considered by many Egyptologists to be the greatest ruler of the civilization of the pharaohs.
During the reign of Ramesses II, Egypt was a very strong and very wealthy nation. It ruled over Nubia and also often extended its boundaries to the north. And so it really was a golden age for Egypt.
This is the most prosperous period, when the kingdom is the richest and its boundaries the widest. After that, we enter periods of crisis, because there are no longer sovereigns strong enough to maintain the unity of the kingdom. A long decline ensues and continues until Cleopatra and the cession of the Kingdom of Egypt to the Romans.
Model ruler, military hero, and fine diplomat, Ramesses II is chiefly known as a builder pharaoh.